Mark Hamalainen has been all over the longevity space for the last 10 years now. Research Associate at Sens, Director of Science at Synthago, founder of Last Death, and now co-founder of Longevity Biotech Fellowship, which is the #1 community for longevity biotech startups in the whole world. We get into quite a bit in this episode: the new longevity retreat, longevity strategies, therapies, and his ideas on what the future could hold, building a new nonprofit, books, and more. If you like this type of content, please like and subscribe, because every little bit helps. Let's stay curious to learn about Mark, the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, and this exciting space that is longevity in this episode of the Learning With Lowell show. You had your first longevity summer camp this past summer, and I'm curious, as it's been about 6 months since summer, and we're looking into the winter, as the stars would say, winter is coming. What did you, looking back, what have you learned from it? What are you going to apply for next year? I just want to kind of unpack what that was like, since it's the first time. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, sure. It was definitely an experiment. Like, my background is working directly at technology development. And so running an event, this was the first time I ever actually ran a significant event, especially a multi-day event. And we got really good feedback on the participants, like for the actual event itself. I think a lot of friendships were made, people got jobs, started collaborations. I think we had a little feedback survey afterwards, and 98% of people said it exceeded their expectations. So that was really great. But from the beginning, my interest is in helping people get involved in the field of longevity and to have the biggest impact they can, and to bring people from other fields. And it's a pretty heavy lift to actually get up to speed on everything you need to know to make good, effective contributions. And so like a weekend or even a 4-day retreat is just the starting point. And the idea was always to have some kind of ongoing program to keep people engaged and make sure that they're, setting good goals, that they're holding each other accountable, that they're getting the resources and help that they need. And that program wasn't designed beforehand. But Nathan Cheng, who runs the ODLB, which is another program to help people get involved in longevity. He actually helped me out quite a bit with planning the summer camp, in particular with social media stuff, because I've never used social media before. But we decided to actually team up, because he has, like, the way ODLB works is it's this online program where you only do, a few hours a week, but over a longer period of time. And we thought, like, combining the retreat as like sort of the start, the induction, with like a 12-week online program, just kind of reinforce and keep the momentum going. That combination, I think, is much more powerful than either together. And so I think I'm looking forward to making that happen, so that for the next retreat, people will get this 12-week program immediately following it. And actually, all of the summer camp attendees are going to be invited to join for the next 12-week online program, even though it's delayed from what would be ideal, which was to have it start right after.
That makes sense. And there's a friend of mine named Amit Khan, and his episode went up this week, actually. He does like an email newsletter to get people up to speed. And so I could see, like, just getting people in the funnel to come to the retreat, and then after the retreat having like such a dense biting into things. It's kind of like what you're saying. You're taking people from 0 to 60, and that does take a lot of time. And that's just, I don't know, an idea thrown out there. You guys have like a little newsletter thing to get people excited leading up to stuff like that. I can see the definite value in having a retreat, because there's a lot of buy-in. Like, I think people who are going to go out into the middle of the woods, and hopefully you guys aren't going to eat their livers. I mean, there's a lot of like trust there, which is nice. I keep hearing about conferences and stuff like that where people just make them up. So I think that the buy-in is really great. But what was the logic between having a retreat versus a conference, for instance? Why one or the other over the other?
I mean, there already are a lot of longevity conferences. And if you want to go just sort of hear sort of the leading people give lectures on what they're doing, those conferences exist. And plus, you can watch most of those talks online for free. So, but in my experience, the highest value part of conferences is often like hanging out in the bar afterwards and like, having a beer with somebody and finding out what they really think about something, and than maybe ending up collaborating with somebody that you get to know while you're there. And so what I wanted to do with this is, because there's already all these free resources if you just want to watch lectures, I wanted to focus entirely on the social part, because I think that's actually more valuable. And so, yeah, sometimes role models are really important. Like just being able to, like, meet somebody and like develop a relationship with them who's like 5 or 10 years ahead of you in the career that you would love to have, and actually like spending time with that person and getting to pick their brain, getting feedback on your ideas, and also talking with other people on a similar path to you. So like that similar path, but maybe coming from different places. And so I think just a lot of sort of creative thought and inspiration, and making it feel possible that you could actually work on this. So I think that's like a social experience.
Mm-hmm. Is there, was there like moments in particular that stood out to you at the retreat where things were coming together? I mean, as someone who's putting it all together, I can imagine there's like some stuff where like everyone's it's actually working versus everyone just like hiding in their tents or something. But was there like a moment where like things clicked and you loved it, or like it felt like it was coming together? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there was a couple really cool moments. I mean, the energy and excitement was actually pretty high for most of it. It was a really beautiful location. The internet sucks there and cell signal sucks there. So people weren't just on their phone. They were actually talking to each other. And I remember at one point there was a panel discussion on bottlenecks to progress in the industry. And one of my good longtime friends from like way back in like 2001, I think, was at the retreat, and he got up and like after the panel was over, we just had people, sort of making attendee contributions. And he's like, the bottleneck to progress is you. it's if the people at this retreat aren't fully committed and dedicated and resilient and persistent in working on this problem, who else is going to do it? Like, so yeah, it's aging is just such a hard problem. And like, yeah, we don't want to underestimate that. And we need more people, a lot more smart people working on it if we're going to expect to make significant progress within our lifetimes.
That makes a lot of sense. And
so if you're listening to this, the bottleneck to progress is you.
There you go. And if I have time, I'll have a giant finger just like coming out of the screen for everybody. But that was one of the things I thought was really interesting, is that you're taking people that you're open to everyone. You're not just people with PhDs or like who are already in some type of biotechnology fields. You're open to really anyone. And so that led me to this question of, if the field is wide open, are there key experiences or talent that you're looking for in building it out that you don't currently have, or that you're hunting for right now? Because like sometimes people don't even know how applicable their experiences are. They don't know how to apply their stuff other than just like, hey, I have energy, I want to put it over here. But if there's some like specific things that people listening could like pick up on and be like, hey, maybe that's me.
Yeah, well, for instance, like if you were, say, younger and just like deciding what to study, I would say study something that is technically very difficult, make yourself hard to replace, make yourself not automatable. For instance, like sort of traditional bench type science where you're pipetting to feed your cells and that type of stuff. That type of approach is really slow and error prone, and is not really the future of biomedical research. You'd be better off learning how to design, program, build automation, lab automation, computational biology, I think is really important. If you are going to learn hands-on skills, make it things that are not easily automatable. Like even like medical practice, like surgery, things like that, things that are just like where human hands and human mind are still essential. I'd focus on those types of things. there's a lot of room for innovation in like policy, regulation. So if you're really into, if you have a mind for legalese and that type of stuff and policy, that's definitely an area. Like if healthcare was designed in a way where the incentives were to optimize health rather than maximize the amount of money that's spent, and just be preventative rather than reactive, that would create like the sort of demand on the demand side of healthcare that would create like more incentive for people to invest in longevity technology, actually. There's a lot of different ways. And then even just culturally, like I think we have a culture right now that is kind of negative about science. And I think that comes a lot from like the human impact on the environment that we've observed. But I think maybe we've overshot and become too negative about science and technology, because like science and technology are a great way to solve problems and create utopian futures. It's just that I think this science plus the bad parts of capitalism have caused some problems. But yeah, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater there.
Yeah. And I think for the most part, people are pretty excited about science. I think people are born scientists, and then K through 12 beats it out of them and taught like not to question or whatever, which is really unfortunate. For what you've learned in the the retreat, what are you going to do different next year? Is there something that there's like an element that you experimented this time that you want to expand upon? Or is there something new that you weren't able to apply in there? For people who are like, hey, this kind of sounds neat, I want to learn about longevity. What are some things that you're going to try out for next time?
Definitely there's going to be some more practical exercises like hackathons where you can actually like get your hands dirty with some data. I came up with the concept of less death and I didn't actually start it until like February last year. We ran the retreat in July, and there just was limited time to prepare. So a lot of it ended up being sort of discussion oriented, but with more time to prepare, we'll definitely allow people to actually do some more practical stuff, so that that'll be an additional aspect to the learning.
It's more hands-on, more. How will that work with the limited? Are you hoping like the Starlink, Sprint? I think it's Sprint. Sprint, like they're going to have like Starlink attachments, so you can have like internet in more places.
Yeah,
are you going to affect like the bandwidth?
There will be improved internet access. I think there's supposed to be a fiber line to the site actually potentially in place by that time. Although I still want to keep people offline if they're not actually doing one of the practical workshops, because I think that was actually pretty good. Like there was there is a Starlink there. And so like if people had a really important meeting or something that they just couldn't miss, like we'd, hook them up with what they needed. But we wanted to wanted people not to be on their phones while they were, trying to engage with each other.
Could you build like a slightly larger Faraday cage, or get one of those like internet, like hey guys, from this period of time, like everything's shut down, we have a little dampener?
No, we just relied on being far away and lots of trees in the path of those microwaves.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that definitely helps. But for next year, if there's fiber optic and stuff, you could like throttle it to like keep people off.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you can also just make it's a big for the summer camp. It's like a pretty large venue, so it's pretty easy to keep people just away from the whatever house where the internet is.
Makes sense. Are there for hackathons? Are there like problems in particular that you'll like suggest in advance, and people could see like what they're going to do? Or is it going to be more like everyone's going to kind of like have like a whiteboard session and then break out from there? Like, how do you think that? I haven't done a hackathon, but I know what they are. So I'm just curious, like, how would you run one for this?
Yeah, I mean, there's different kinds of hackathons. Like some can just be like you have a whiteboard and you like bring up like a major bottleneck in the industry, and then you have people kind of break up into smaller groups and just think about potential solutions to it, and then come back together and like compare what was generated and like sort of work off that. And that can be just done in a few hours, versus if you have like a data set that people are going to actually try to like run some machine learning on. And like you said before, like we take a broad different types of people. So we'll have different types of hackathons depending on what your sort of background skills are. For the people that like, are really into like machine learning or something, we'll have something that they can do that is like, but then, we'll split people up into different groups.
Makes
Maybe there
sense.
could be like a guerrilla marketing hackathon where you come up with ideas to get more mainstream support for longevity.
Yeah. Well, I think a really effective one is probably pick a fight with someone. I keep seeing this. Apparently, like the most effective way to get like free press is like find your friend and say, "Hey, we're gonna fight in public," but like behind the scenes, you're friends, and then that way like everyone talks about you. So you could just like pick a fight with another person that you're like, "Hey, we're getting clear with this." Then in public, you
so
just like always main.
Algorithms like conflict, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
That's just unfortunate, but that might work.
Maybe you and I can fight.
There you go. Yeah, well, no one listened to this. Like, just ignore this part. But yeah, we could hopefully not physically fight, but like just online. But it has been a couple months since the retreat. What have you seen come from it, other than just like jobs? And I think there's a merging of the two groups that you talked about into the fellowship that now exists. But what has been the result of it? Have you seen any surprise results? Like people starting companies? I don't know. What would surprise you at this point?
Surprises. I mean, actually, a few people that went to the retreat are starting companies. I don't know if they would have done it anyways, but like, now they're connected to like, they can make some quicker hires because they met people. Yeah. So it's more of a amplifying and accelerating people's paths. We tended to pick people that were already passionate about longevity. So they were on that path, but we hoped to amplify their ability to like make progress faster on personally and together. I guess the feedback, like the amount of demand for it was very high, and I've gotten ongoing, lots of interest for people like, when's the next one? What's coming next? So I think the demand is really high, which has been good. Mm-hmm. Surprises. I don't know. I'm kind of like one of those like level imperturbable type people. So
that's good.
I don't know.
It's good to do. It's good to have. It's like it's very stoic. It's like
just
it's not too bad
away,
or too.
Man, it's like to take on a problem like longevity. It's like aging. It's really hard, really complex. Mm-hmm. Like we still don't understand most of aging actually, and yet we're trying to intervene in it. When I was doing my PhD, which I dropped out of, I spent 2 years grinding away in a lab and demonstrated that the work of my predecessor at that lab, like all of their results were just experimental artifacts, and I was going to have to start from scratch. And like, that's not unusual. So you kind of have to be pretty stoic if you're going to do research in biological science, I would say. And you have to be really careful about like getting overhyping, especially longevity. There's like, these trends that come and go, like telomeres. I'd say reprogramming is the current fad. And I think while it makes sense that, like aging is reset between generations, there's a lot that happens in the generation of germ cells and fertilization and embryogenesis. There's a lot of stuff that happens through that process that would be pretty hard to replicate in like a fully grown adult somatic person with like non-dividing tissues and things like that. It's not super clear to me that it'll be the panacea that some people that I won't name make it out to be. But I do think it's like definitely part of the puzzle.
Do you see yourself doing the more data science side of things, the machine learning then? Or like, how do you see yourself moving forward with the field?
Personally? Right now I'm entirely focused on just getting this Longevity Biotech Fellowship running and making that program as useful and scaling it to the largest degree that we can. So that's kind of my focus right now. If I was to move on to something in the future, like say this gets up and running, we hire people, I'm able to delegate work. My major passion has been gene therapy. Like I think we were talking a little bit before you started recording, but like if you could get a software update annually the same way you update the software on your phone or your computer, that the technology that we need in order to do that, I mean, projects in that area, in that research area is where I would focus my effort if I was to go back onto a technical project. And that would definitely, computational modeling is going to have to be a part of that, for sure.
Makes sense. Do you see as a component of what you're doing going to be like funding research in those different areas? Like as the nonprofit gets bigger, do you see different arms? Like there's the education, there's bringing people together to have these things happen. I referenced New Harvest before the call as well, I believe. And one thing they do is like they literally like they do the training, they do the stuff, and they also like build out some of the IP and open source it for other people, which I think life sciences, lifespan. Like I know there's another organization that does that, so I could see why maybe you just want to focus on this one area. But how do you see the nonprofit developing as you guys get bigger? Because there's such a demand. Yeah.
Something like the way OpenAI develops stuff and makes it available. I mean, I think that there just should be things like that in the longevity industry and biotech. Biotech tends to be a little bit more conservative and siloed than other fields. And that's actually, I would say, a problem. Part of that is because it's very expensive to get some technology or therapy or something like that from like prototype to market. And so people are very, I don't know, maybe conservative and careful and secretive. But if there were, I mean, there's definitely, like, for instance, a comprehensive database of everything that changes with age in the human body. That would be something like, I'm talking single cell multiomics from every organ tissue, longitudinally over life courses of people, like massive data sets that you could then, people that were good at computational biology and other research could then use that data to like come up with ideas and generate models of biology. I think that would be something that would be a really good public resource that would accelerate progress across the whole field. That's the kind of thing that one might think that the government would fund, but there's this thing called in the United States called the National Institute of Aging, which sounds like the kind of organization that might fund something like that, but they fortunately don't. They should probably be renamed the National Institute of Alzheimer's, and we should start an actual National Institute of Aging that would generate this type of data. Like the way NASA, sends out probes and gets data on space and for physicists to use in their research. The National Institute of Aging should be generating huge amounts of data that can be then used by the whole academic and private community. Or maybe we just need to make something new. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible to do that, to get all that data? Because you'd have to, I feel like that'd be quite invasive to like get like all the tissues that exist. Is
for a living person, some tissues you could, some tissues you wouldn't be able to. I mean, some of the data would have to be collected from donation of tissue from people that had died. And so people do die. So that is something that's available. Longitudinally in a living person, there are certainly some limitations, but we do biopsies, like some people might be down to volunteer. Your liver doesn't mind losing a few cells. They'll grow back.
Yeah. I think you can lose up to a third of your liver, and your liver's just grows it all back, which is pretty cool. And I think it's to the normal functionality too. It's not like even like deformed or dysfunctional with the third missing in regrowth. There's a quote that I could keep talking about data, not dating, that I'll read, and then I think that'll go into our conversation on data. But aging, quite simply, is a loss of information, and that's from David Sinclair from his Lifespan book. And we keep talking about data, and people are going to write in the comments to make fun of me for this, but data. What do you think? So there's a lot of data there that we can grab. Is there specific data that you think we should specialize on if the idea is that aging is the loss of information? Or I guess you can interpret that quote and diverge us in a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty broad thing to say, right? Yeah. Like another way to look at the same thing is just like if you just look at the composition of an old person versus a young person, you can just identify all the things that have changed. Information stored in like the genome, whether it be like the actual DNA sequence or epigenetic modifications, those definitely change over time. You develop a thing called clonal. You get all these different clonal populations that have different mutations, and so yeah, that's definitely part of it. But the thing is, like with aging, I view it more as like a network of phenomena that are all affecting each other. So like we don't have a program that tells us to accumulate, for instance, 7-keto cholesterol, which is what Oki talked about in one of your previous podcasts. That's not like actively programmed. It's more of negligence. It's just like something that is like sort of not part of the program. It just happens by chance, by side effect. And so there's no like, you can't just like, reset the epigenome and expect the 7-keto cholesterol to just go away, because we never had a program to get rid of it in the first place. So those things are accumulating and they're causing, dysfunction of tissues. They're causing mobilization of the immune system, inflammation, and then like all of those things have like, then they have, effects, like they'll accelerate other aspects of aging, right? So like you have all these different things slowly going wrong, slowly breaking, and they're all sort of amplifying each other. And so loss of epigenetic information is one of those things, but it's not the only one. And if you fixed only it, any aspect of aging, if you just fix one part of it, you probably won't get a huge gain. You have to fix multiple parts at the same time. So I think if you were to pair a sort of epigenetic reprogramming type approach that David Sinclair would advocate for, with also like some damage repair type stuff that Aubrey de Grey has advocated for decades, with some replacement of tissues that seem to be developing problems that you don't understand, and like you just want to do the stupid thing and just replace them, which is what Jean Herbert would advocate for. I think it's going to be some combination of these things that will actually have a significant impact on longevity.
So I think, the first question you asked me in our pre-talk was that like what I like about longevity, and I made this point that I think that like Alzheimer's, most likely like what we'll do is that we'll just like rejuvenate, replace, or remove, like have that type of system set up, versus like actually cure the illness. We'll just be kind of like every 5 years, like you go in, get cholesterol taken out, get all the stuff that we know is bad, get the things that your body doesn't make put into it. That's I think that's probably like an okay model to think about it. But how do you think it'll be? Do you think it'll be like that in terms of like illness? Like we'll just like stave them off, or do you think it's more of like well, it sounds like it's more of a network effect. So I imagine we think similarly on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you can think of like first generation, second generation, third generation longevity technologies. So like the first generation stuff is going to be some drugs like metformin and rapamycin, and hopefully better than those, that sort of tweak metabolism in interesting ways. Like they're because within the human species, there's a lot of genetic diversity, and some people have resistance to certain diseases, right? And so sometimes you can actually replicate a beneficial genotype without actually genetically modifying somebody just with a drug. A good example of that is like PCSK9 inhibitors. There's people that just have naturally super low levels of blood cholesterol, particularly the forms of lipoproteins in terms of their size and what protein species are on them. Like some people just naturally have very low levels of the type of bloodborne cholesterol that causes problems, and they don't get as much cardiovascular disease because of that. And that is the result of a mutation where a particular gene's expression level is just reduced, and you can actually create a drug that interferes with the expression of that gene and replicate that beneficial genotype. So the first generation longevity technologies are going to do that kind of stuff. You just systemic administration of a drug that like somehow tweaks metabolism in a beneficial way, often inspired by sort of natural variation that already exists in the human population. So the damage repair type stuff, those will have to be, I mean, if you're not doing something that prevents the accumulation of new damage, then obviously it has to be periodic. But the accumulation of aging damage is sort of is slow. It has to be slow, right? Because like if it was fast, it would kill us before we were old enough to reproduce. So the accumulation of the types of damage that people talk about with age-associated damage is actually pretty slow. So infrequent clearing of it could be pretty powerful. And then if you want to look at that could be like second generation technology. And then you might look at like third generation technology where we get so good at gene therapy and computational biology that we can actually like make design changes and be like, oh, well, what if we just change these genes, modify this pathway, and then all of a sudden this type of aging just doesn't occur anymore because you've actually modified the design. Because I mean, if you look at the difference between me and you and a redwood tree and a whale is like the sequence of DNA bases in our genomes. Like the scope of what's possible to design in biology is huge. And I think it's certainly possible to design an organism that's rate of aging is much lower than humans like naturally have. And so once we get better at design, we could actually make intelligent design modifications to actually prevent some of these things from happening in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's like the concept of the different phases. A lot of these things, it seems very like in the U.S. at least, it doesn't really seem like a lot of people are hitting on these things. They'll like, oh, if you have like they'll hit like little small things, like they'll treat for things, and then they'll make a treatment for the side effects of the thing that they made. They'll have like one therapy, and then they'll cause side effects. Then they'll do something to fix those side effects, but then those two things will cause a new side effect, and then you have to like, it's kind of like a circle. It's like flat circle. I don't know if anyone ever knows True Detective. I'll make reference there. But so it seems like a very novel way of thinking. Maybe I haven't been exposed too much into the pharma area, but so it seems like the biggest thing that longevity has to fight is just like this ignorance in terms of how to think about building therapies and doing the research and stuff. Or how do you?
Yeah, well, we have like an industry that was like very successful at coming up with vaccines, antibiotics, and a lot of that is like just sort of dealing with acute health problems. Statins maybe are like one of the examples of something that sort of breaks a bit from that mold, where you're actually trying to prevent something decades before it happens. But that's the exception, not the rule. It's changing industries, or it's changing the way an industry thinks about things is definitely a process. I think the longevity industry, Nathan, with his longevity list, tracks sort of the market cap of different types of companies in the biotech sector, and longevity has been growing. I think it's grown 7x in 7 years, but it's still less than 1% of the industry. And when you look at academic research, it's even smaller as a percentage of sort of biological research grants, but it's growing fast. So we're in kind of an accelerating phase right now where people are starting to think about, like, for instance, moving away from just sort of like chemical drugs where you're trying to interface with biology by modifying chemistry in these like simple ways to interfacing with biology on an information level. So then that's where you would be switching to like gene therapies. And I think that will be much more powerful, but there's technology development to do to make that safe and effective.
Makes sense. Is there anything fundamentally standing in your eyes? Like what is today from having like a software patch for genes, like kind of your personal thing that you love? What do you think is standing in the way of that? I mean, obviously there's a lot of R&D, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is R&D. It's, I'd say, so biodistribution, in terms of like, if you want to modify, like you have, trillions of cells in your body, and if you just inject like a lipid nanoparticle, most of the time the liver will absorb most of it. Like if you want to modify the liver or modify like the cells that are already circulating in your blood, Those are fairly easy targets. But if you wanted to inject a gene therapy and have like one copy of the gene therapy go to every cell in your body, that's like the biodistribution problem. That's really, or the delivery problem. That's actually pretty difficult. So you actually have to design your therapeutics to be sort of probably, well, there's a lot of different ways that you could solve that problem. Like Matt Schultz, who's one of the mentors was one of the mentors at the Longevity Summer Camp and is going to be a mentor for the Longevity Biotech Fellowship, is working on sort of changing the charge in the lipid particle so that it, I think, charged particles get absorbed much more quickly, and the uncharged ones can sort of diffuse around and get to more places before they're absorbed. And they're also, I think, they have less of an issue with sort of immune reactions, so toxicity. Charged particles are a lot more toxic. So there's tweaks you can do chemically to the gene delivery particles. You can also have therapies that actually have sort of logic encoded into them. So like say, if your therapy is DNA based, DNA is software. And so maybe your software can tell if it's gotten into a cell that's already been modified and just do nothing in that case, right? So you don't have to worry about overloading a cell with one cell gets 1,000 doses and another cell gets like one. You can just have logic encoded such that the therapy actually does nothing to a cell that's already received the therapy. But we're in the early days of being able to design and build that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think it sounds similar to a lot of the stuff we're doing with the yeast and whatnot, where we design them. Use
we're
CRISPR
pretty good at designing
to,
single cell microorganisms, like editing those. But still primitive days when it comes to modifying, large animals with like complicated many tissues and trillions of cells.
Yeah, and I think George Church's lab just came out with there's some new research that came out where they can target like 4 or 5 things at the same time and hit all of them versus doing like one at a time. It's pretty cool. Like it used to be
multiplexed.
Like it used to be like you get lucky if you hit one without causing another problem. And now we're getting to those levels.
They can do more than just a few. They can do like hundreds of thousands at once. I think they can modify. They can change the codon set of a bacteria now. Like it's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, I have a friend who's in a startup in this field, and he said that like the FBI talks to him a lot because like apparently like bioterrorism is like a concern, and with the technology getting so low, there's like some concern about that type of stuff, which is it's pretty nice that no one's thought about it too much, or like we've been like 100%, like we've it's like if our defenses are so good, like FBI or whatever, it's like running things that we never have any like 9/11 bioterrorism type event, like then no one knows that it's a concern. You know what I mean? Like other than theoretically. Versus like every now and again, like something pops through. I would like to just assume that people are ignorant of this potential, or that the people who do know don't want to do it.
Well, I think the people that do know don't want to do it is actually a big part of it, because the type of person who, goes to work in George Church's lab and does a PhD, like they're usually there because they're excited about like making the world a better place using this technology. It's a long path for somebody to like, the type of person who is, I guess the mental attributes of the type of person that would want to do harm with this technology doesn't tend to overlap very much with the type of person who would have a successful career in this industry.
Yeah.
So, but of course, the easier it gets to do synthetic biology, the more people will be able to do it. And yeah, so it's definitely an important thing. I think a lot of the more powerful technology is going to be developed in sort of automated labs where you're doing research, not by hand, but like the lab itself is actually automated, and you're just programming algorithms to search biological space for solutions to problems. And when you have that sort of software layer in between, that's actually an opportunity to encode security as well. So, and because these facilities are going to be for the most part will be centralized and big and expensive, and so like the facility can be secure and the software to interface with it can be secure.
So like it would, so we would like hide. So like the IP to do the interfacing would be kind of like kept in house, and that's secure. Or like what would stop, like if the technology existed, what stops from like North Korea from doing it? Could they just like copy it? Or is it like securing the DNA itself? I'm just like clarifying what you mean. Like you can build like big walls, but sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, there's different aspects to it. I'm not an expert in this area, so you could probably get somebody on that's more of an expert in this area. Like what I was talking about more was that if people are running their experiments from their computers, like they're at Stanford, but like the actual facility is in Redwood City. Like when people run genetic code, like you could have software that could look at that code and say, does this code pose a risk?
That makes sense. Yeah. That's very straightforward then. Yeah, I was just thinking about it.
Not actually. It's actually a really hard problem.
Well, I mean, in terms of a concept, you know, like it like hard to implement. Yes.
In practice. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, hopefully no one picks up on that idea. So for the learning and getting people up to speed, how do you see it working out? Like, are you going to have people like self-select into like, I want to learn about the policy aspect and you know, have someone who mentors like a track in that, someone who wants to learn about, you know, Python and some machine learning, like learn about that. Like, how do you guys see that going? So we talked about a number of different really cool areas, but as you can imagine, I love learning, and I actually I'm going to like write out like how I learn anything really fast. And so, cause for some reason, like no one's taught how to learn, which is kind of sad. So I'm curious, like, how are you actually going to funnel people into like where they could be most effective? So like, how do you determine where people can be most effective? I assume there's gonna be self-determinism there, but yeah, go ahead. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm asking.
There's two aspects to this, I think. So in the Longevity Biotech Fellowship itself, we're going to have what we call mastermind groups, where you'll get kind of paired up with other people that are sort of have similarities in the paths that they're on. And they might be, some of them are a little further ahead, some of them further behind, but they have similarities in their paths. And so they'll sort of sync together and develop friendships together and help each other. And then, of course, we have mentors for a lot of different topics, and they'll have talks, questions and answers, office hours, that types of thing. Something that I'm really interested in doing is setting up residency programs, because I think one of the best ways to learn is to just do things. And so to actually like say you're really into policy, and, you know, I got my friend Dylan over at A4LI, and they could use an intern for some project. Like maybe we'll hook you up as a residency, and then you'll get a chance to like hands-on work with some people and learn that way. So you know, we got definitely things in mind for that. It's because there's so many like I had originally thought years ago about like, should there be a longevity boot camp, sort of analogous to software boot camps? The problem there is that like, it's easy to teach somebody like, oh, learn Python or learn whatever JavaScript, but like learn longevity, like what do you mean, like which part? So it's like, we need chemists, we need mathematicians, we need people that are good at doing the fundraising. We need like, there's just so many different roles to play that there's not like one boot camp. So yeah, that's why we kind of have this model of the fellowship, which has like ongoing education, mentorship, chances to like, you know, befriend your peers and work together on learning. And then residencies is another thing that we'll be exploring.
I love the idea of residency and getting hands-on. I think most people, if they can get to that level, are going to really enjoy it just in general. Versus like maybe a theory is like kind of fun sometimes, but sometimes it's not. I think like seeing how things apply is like probably more exciting for most people.
I definitely learn by just doing things. And some people are good at learning by reading. I learn by doing. Yeah,
I like one thing that I do, I call it, well, the surgeons do this. I didn't make this myself, but it's called like watch one, do one, teach one. Until like you watch the surgery, you do the surgery, and then you teach other people. And so I think that is a pretty effective method. I don't know how I could see some ways you could incorporate into your teaching methodology for what you're building. And then you could have like other people like teaching other people, and then it kind of like starts exploding, like adding sugar to like a little petri dish, like the population going up because everyone's like multiplying the knowledge and expanding it.
Yeah. And we actually already have, for instance, people the people that were like attendees at the summer camp are now counselors at the next event like that. So you kind of like just keep on paying it forward and expanding. Exponential growth.
Yes. And is there like a wild card feature where you could do like 2 weeks or whatever, like a project in all the different areas, and then you could like specialize from there?
I mean, that would be more logistically complicated to set up. I think that's the kind of thing that we could strive towards in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely, there's logistics and resources required for that. And that would be maybe partnering with like Stanford or some like existing institution to like try to put that kind of stuff together. It's an interesting idea. Have to think about that.
Is there, in terms of scalability, at a certain point, the area itself, unless it becomes like a Burning Man or something, which I've seen pictures of, like it's like a giant city or something in the desert. Do you see like chapters coming up? Like you guys are the main one, and then maybe like have an authorized chapter of the someone who attended the first year is helping out the second year, maybe the third year. They're like have their own little chapter in like maybe like Miami or something.
Yeah, definitely. So local chapters is the part of the plan. As we get bigger, I think one of the great things about the summer camp was that you could actually talk to and to some degree get to know most of the people that came. It was a little bit too big for that, and we actually thought maybe it was a little bit too big. And so we don't want to make the retreats larger. The retreats will always be small and just more of them. We might even have like multiple parallel at the same time. So there could be like, a UK, a Germany, a California, and a Florida one that the retreat happens at the same time, but then they're all part of the same cohort for the online portion. So that's the sort of direction that we plan to go with that.
That makes sense. And there's tons of experimentation you can do to like optimize. Because I was thinking you could like specialize for like their where they want to focus, like the policy or whatever. But like to that level of specialization, it stops being as much fun if you're just talking to like other policy people. Like 90% of the fun is like talking to other people that you don't even know what their conversation can come from.
Yeah, and that's a lot of the retreat was like that. You just sit down for breakfast, lunch, or dinner like with different people at the table, and you just, so what do you do? And like those conversations are super important.
Do you see any potential or any brainstorming around like putting like focused stress on people? Like I think one of the big things that in terms of like building bonds is like you could sit down and have dinner at like a normal restaurant versus like going for a hike. You're probably going to know the person better if you go for a hike and do something strenuous. Like that's like a proven thing. Also, I don't know. But like, so eating dinner out in the middle of nowhere, like that's like still more strenuous. Do you guys?
I think camping, because summer camp was actually camping. And I think that was actually stressful for some people. We did actually, we went on a group hike. We also had yoga classes in the mornings. Like it was definitely, there was stuff happening. So it was more than just, talking over dinner and workshops. Like we had people moving around and doing things. And it was part of like those things are healthy too. So it's like, if you're an advocate for longevity, you should also sort of live. We don't highlight or talk about the sort of lifestyle type, diet type stuff as part of our programming. There's enough, resources out there for that. If that's what you're interested in, we're really focused on the actual content is all in science and technology development and other forms of like sort of ways to accelerate progress. But at the same time, it's like we served healthy food and we had, exercise, and like it was the experience of being there was like a healthy experience. And that seemed appropriate.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And there's so much, it's new. So there's so many different ways you can go on it and experiment and try new things. I mean, you could have like, there's like a Friday the 13th game where there's like one guy with like a machete and he hunts everyone else. But you could have like a football phage and like other people want to play. It could be like little bacteria being reprogrammed or something. I think that's a little silly, but like silliness is fun. Biology. Yeah. Yeah. Anything to get people.
Summer camp, actual summer camp when I was a kid, playing this like carnivore, omnivore, herbivore game where you're like running around in the forest and like some people are carnivores and people are herbivores. And I don't remember exactly what the rules are, but it made me think of that. It was pretty fun.
I've never heard of this before. Is it like rock, paper, scissors? I mean, I guess it's been too long. I've never been to a summer camp. I walk by them sometimes.
You're actually running around. It was more like a game of tag, but where there was 3 different types of players instead of just 2. And there was more than one sort of person.
I'm always surprised by how quickly adults become kids. If you give them like a flashlight and tell them to go play flashlight tag or something, it's like it's really nice. And then I think people see each other more. So I'm glad the event went well, and I'm excited for the next one. I don't know if I'll go because I don't travel all that much. I'm kind of a introvert, but I will try to get out. And for people, is there like for the next one, what will be the capacity, and how quickly will they get to learn about it? Like,
So it's actually been announced already. If you go to longbiofellowship.org, you can apply right now. The next retreat is actually called Longevity Winter Camp. It's this January in Marin, just an hour north of San Francisco. And this one's actually going to be a little bit smaller than the summer camp. So I think there's going to be only like 45 people, including the counselors. And so, yeah, that'll the retreats will tend to be between 40 to 70-ish total people, including counselors. So yeah, the next one is in January. So you can apply now.
sweet.
And then there'll be Longevity Summer Camp is going to happen again. And we have other locations that we're in the early stages of planning for. So I don't want to announce them yet, but there will be announcements.
Makes sense. And then I know there's like the TV show called Survivor, where like they used to like go all over the place, but then they just settle on Fiji because they get tax benefits for it. As you guys are exploring different areas, I imagine like eventually there'll be a consolidation, and then you have all the chapters and stuff that are growing. So for the organization itself, are there people that you need, or you're looking for to partner, either like businesses to partner with, or people with specific talent, experiences that you guys need to bring on board to execute the next year very strongly?
Yeah, so we do take sponsors, and I think the sponsors that we sort of are going after are people who are employers in the industry. So, for example, like Retro is sponsoring us. They're one of the big, exciting new companies. But you can see on our website some of the other ones, and we only just started asking for those pretty recently. Venture capital, because they getting access to the Longevity Bio Fellowship, it's going to be probably quite a few people involved in this. And so there'll be opportunities, definitely like investment opportunities will come out of it. And so I think investors probably should be interested in sponsoring or getting involved in some way or another. And then in terms of the people, I mean, the main thing is I want people to apply. Like if you're interested in running a local chapter or something like that, I think the best way to start is actually go through the program and then join the community, and then just, talk to us, hang out with us, and be like, hey, I want to start we should do a retreat in Australia. And I'll be like, oh yeah, who else? Well, we need at least such and such, we need a venue, we need this. And like, it'll just start to come together. So if you want to get involved, join the fellowship.
That makes sense. And if there is, I didn't see it, maybe I'm just blind, but do you have like every X, like for every like 100,000, like X happens, or like for the $1 million goal of raising funds, like you're gonna be able to do X, Y, and Z? Like, is that available somewhere, or like can you just like walk us through like how does, like, so if someone like gave you like $1 million, like where does that go essentially, and then like how do people see where it goes, and then how can people track what the
we are a nonprofit. We have put together some sort of budgets at different scales for like what we would do, depending on how much we had. I think if we wanted to expand faster and have more retreats in parallel, we would need to hire some more staff, basically. So right now it's just me and Nathan full time, and we would probably need some more people full time in order to just handle all of the logistics and work involved in making those things happen. We also could do some cool software stuff and do fancier practical exercises and workshops. So that would require, getting some expert help to design some of that kind of stuff. I don't yet have like just sort of like at these different tiers, this is what we would do, sort of like, I guess, what is that, like the crowdsource type fund level things. We should probably put that together. I've just been really focused on just the sort of creating this new merged organization with Nathan, and then getting the first retreat going. We decided to focus on, because we do charge for the retreat, and we charge as little as we can, but we want to try to cover our costs to a significant degree just through sponsorships and event tickets, rather than being reliant on donors. But if we could get donors, we could definitely accelerate certain things, especially so another aspect of local chapters is I think every major university and biotech hub should have like a meetup group that meets like once a month to talk about longevity. Same like effective altruists have done this pretty well. Like most universities have an effective altruist club. There should be the same thing for longevity at every university. And so we definitely have ideas for how we could sort of make that happen. So we have friends with I have friends at this organization called Nucleate that's done this very effectively for sort of entrepreneurship in universities. And so sort of replicating what they did for longevity, partnering with them and other organizations in the longevity space to sort of set up these local chapters. Yeah.
I think it makes sense. And there's tons of places like Igem, for instance, that would just fit. Like if there's like a partnership or something where you guys could like work together and like have like a longevity themed Igem competition.
Yeah, I really like to sort of jointly throw in events and that type of thing to get the cross pollination from different communities. Like even you were mentioning like the sort of cell-based meat type people earlier. A lot of technology development is happening to try to lower the cost of cell-based meat. Could actually end up having applications in, growing cells for therapeutic purposes. Because right now, one of the obstacles to regenerative medicine is it's really expensive. And so if we can figure out ways to lower the cost of production of cells and organs, people from that industry might actually learn things or just develop the right mindset that they can apply to try to turn these to scale and make these processes more efficient and cost effective.
That makes sense. And I wanted to ask you, now that we're talking about food real quick, what do you think the future of food is? Like if you were to just imagine, like, I think you said you're like mid-30s, so you're like a little bit older than me, but we're in the same age bracket. So what do you think the future of food's going to look like?
Food? Honestly, I don't think about it too much. I don't super over optimize in that area. I mean, I don't eat junk. I don't eat things with added sugar. The future of food versus what people should eat aren't necessarily the same thing.
I mean, Twinkies still exist.
I mean, if I wasn't working on longevity or if I thought it was a solved problem, I think, energy and climate and conservation are other things that I'm passionate about. And so I would love to see us minimize the amount of animals in agriculture. If we could, get that protein from plant-based sources or animal cell culture, I think that would be huge because of just like the amount of the surface of the earth that is committed to animal agriculture right now is kind of absurd, and it would be awesome to just let that go back to nature instead. Yeah. So that's something that I would, so figuring out lower impact ways to get the protein that we need. And I don't think that sort of like, the Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger they're pretty cool, but they're not like a perfect substitute. Like the amino acid profile is not optimal for absorption by humans. There's definitely room for improvement there. I have dabbled in being a vegan and vegetarian, but largely because I don't like the way animals are treated. I founded an organization called Less Death, and animals do a lot of the dying in our world right now. So it'd be nice to see less suffering, both by humans and animals.
Yeah, I think I hope that's the way it goes. I think that a lot of food, it'll be like with horses and cars. Like horses won't entirely go away, but they'll be treated much better, which is that's a huge victory. Versus just being beast of burdens.
Yeah, the horses now are probably pretty well treated compared to horses when they were just being used as cars.
Yeah. There's like Wagyu beef and stuff. So even if they'll be really, really special.
In the streets anymore.
Yes. I think there was like a study that said that by 1903, the poop in the streets was going to be so much that like New York City wouldn't be able to function. They didn't they couldn't foresee cars existing, which I thought that's a really funny thing.
I think the problem, that was actually, I wonder if that really accelerated the transition to cars in a way that is not analogous to the meat industry, because the sort of suffering and environmental impact of the meat industry is kind of abstracted away and people don't actually see it firsthand. I
Yeah.
mean, go to like a factory pig farm and look at the waste that's being produced and the suffering there. Like people
Yeah.
don't actually see it. Whereas like if you're walking down the street and having to avoid stepping in poop, that's like more in your face.
That makes sense. I grew up on a farm, so I'm used to any
Mhm.
animal that I came in contact with was treated very fairly, like and
Yeah.
very good and had happy lives. But I think
Yeah,
the big
I think that's great. Like, so if that's all that we had, and it was much smaller scale, I think most people would think that that's a better system.
Yeah, I think like that type of technology has a lot of potential for relieving like disaster areas, like like the crabs going extinct. Like their fishing keeps going down and down to what they can do now
Mhm.
at zero, so they could just complement that. I think that's like a lot like they're not seeing it, but they're seeing like the economic impact of it. So I think that's how they get more excited for it. Or if a country has like experienced famine any time in the last like generation or two, like it's been a very long time since America experienced a famine. So for the most part, like people don't even think about food too much. So you seem like a person who reads at least a little bit. I'm curious, like how do you go about? Do you have certain watering holes on the internet for learning? Are there books that you're reading right now? Like drop anything you recommend. I'm going to read, and I will tell you that I like it or
So
not.
actually I've almost finished writing a blog post that'll go up on the Longevity Biotech Fellowship website that's going to have a bunch of recommendations.
Oh, sweet.
And we're talking with a couple other longevity organizations right now about jointly developing a sort of a syllabus that we would
Hmm.
just keep updated. And these, if you want to get involved, like these are all the things that one might want to read, broken down by sort of like sort of introductory versus deeper. So it's like maybe you need an introduction to computational biology, but you're not actually a software person. So you just need to understand enough that you can talk to the software people. Or maybe you actually want to become a computational biologist, and then we give you a list of like, these are the textbooks, and this is the software stack that you should install on your computer and start playing with.
That makes
Um,
sense. Well, I could.
yeah, putting a
I,
syllabus together that's a work in progress. What's his name? Martin Borsch Jensen had a tweet recently that I could link you to, where he listed a bunch of really good resources. That's like a good starting point.
yeah, what would be just a couple of teasers for people listening in that might be in a car and can't Google things?
Well, a simple book to look up if you're looking for an introduction that's like fairly scientifically like it's not like pitching like a particular person's theory, but it's like a good overview of the longevity industry. Ageless by Andrew Steele, which came out in December 2020. It was quite, I think, well done in that regard. It gives you a good overview of the different all the of aging biology and all the different strategies people are using in terms of trying to develop interventions.
Sweet. That's actually on my list to check out as well, so that makes it easy on my part.
Yeah, the Audible
So
book is well done. So
awesome. And then is there? So when you've transitioned to many different careers over the last like 10 years. Like you started at like one, and I don't know. Like to me, like they have a theme, of course, right? Like you didn't go from like doctor to like I don't know, bare knuckle
and bridge
boxer or something.
engineer.
There we go. Like I can see doctor and bridge engineer like somehow like the structure of the human body, the structure of bridges or something like that. But as you like move from one place to the next, how do you like? What is your process for gaining that knowledge and learning new things? We talked about practical, doing something practical. So
Mhm.
I could guess at what it is, but I'm curious, like, how do you like go about finding practical things to test and learn knowledge?
Um, I guess I make friends that are good at the things that I want to be good at, and so then
Hmm.
I can like pick their brains and learn from them. I definitely do read a lot. Actually, I said I'm not a I learn by doing, but I'm a pretty voracious reader. Reading allows you to sort of sample what's possible, and then you have to actually try to put it into practice. Um, I don't know. I've kind of just jumped in the deep end frequently, like dropped out of a PhD and joined a startup, pitched investors, hired people. Like I had never done any of those things before. Just jumped in the deep end and ask for advice. Like talk to people, ask for advice. I think a really important thing is to not be emotionally attached to the way you do something or to any particular ideas. To be very very willing to drop your approaches and your ideas when you come across something better. People, I think that's something that is not taught. We're taught in school that you have to have the right answer, and if you have the wrong answer, you're bad. Right? But like everybody, like all of our answers are usually not wrong per se, but not the best answer, and you can usually find a better answer. And like, so being really sort of curious and like being excited when you come across a better way of doing something, rather than being like, oh, I put all this effort into this other way of doing things, and it's always wasted. They're like, no, just be excited that you found a better way to do something.
Yeah, and I mean, I know people who, even if you suggest they could do something better, they're like, well, I'm not perfect. I'm like, no, of course you're not perfect. You gotta grow.
Yeah, there's like a sort of an emotional attachment to ways of doing things, or a defensiveness, because, but yeah, just sort of having a mindset of like curiosity and excitement around new things.
Is there, outside of longevity, because I think you'd beat me in terms of resources there, is there something that you're curious about? Maybe I can recommend some books for you.
Uh, oh man, I spent so much time on longevity. I just downloaded Duolingo, and I'm starting to learn Spanish right now.
Mm.
I don't know if you know anything about language acquisition. Any tips on language acquisition?
Immersion. There's a
Immersion?
guy, yeah, basically go to where there's Spanish speakers and only speak Spanish there. Like have an entire day where you only speak Spanish to navigate. Like you'll start like caveman-y. Yeah, you'll start out caveman-y, like water, mind, want.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I have a bunch of friends that are Spanish as their first language. And so I was like, I feel like it would be cool to be able to converse with them in their first language. And so that's why I started picking it up. But I could just tell them like, hey, when we're hanging out, like just talk Spanish to me. I'm going to struggle, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, and you can even add like a distance. I think it's called disincentive, where it's like for every English word you have to use to like ask for a clarification, it's like like $10, like a buck or whatever. Like just enough where it's like annoying, but not too much where you go bankrupt or whatever. So you just like you can ask for help, but then like keeps galvanizing you, because you can ask like, what is the word for chocolate, and then it's only like $1 for saying chocolate. KSL, whatever. What is the word? KS. Don't do this to me. I don't know Spanish either. So that's exciting. Yeah, I think Duolingo is probably the best bet you got there. There's some people who are literally their entire lives just learning new languages, and they're I'll have to do a search and see if I can find you. So there's some like TED Talks on how to do it better. But I think the big thing is just like immersion. Like if you just are around it a lot, like if you give yourself like a month where you're only surrounded by people like that, speaking that language, like you'll probably be fluent pretty quick. Especially for Spanish. Yeah. Spanish is an interesting language, especially so is it just for the front element, or does the culture, the thing I realized when I was like starting to learn other languages is the culture is so much a part of the language.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I like to travel a lot, and Spain, like I think if you're going to expand the portion of the earth that you can travel in and like, communicate effectively with people, it feels like Spanish is probably the best second language. I'm not really sure. I guess it depends where you want to travel to, but
yeah. Well, I'm hoping there's going to be like a Babel fish one day. You just like pop it in your ear and it translates for you. I don't know if you're a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Or Matrix style, where you actually download information and like it gets incorporated into your neural networks, and you can actually have a skill.
I wonder what that'll be like a phantom memory, like one of those like implanted memories. I wonder about that type of technology, but we won't go off on that track. So last couple of questions. What does happiness mean to you? I've been asking more like personal questions because I don't know. Like I always feel like probably should do this, but it's been actually really fun to ask people these type of questions, and the listeners have been enjoying it as well. So what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness. I think I'm usually happy. What does it mean? I mean, obviously it just means that you feel good. Tends to be associated with like sort of feeling hopeful about the future, satisfied with where you are, probably in the moment, and like really truly like there's a lot of things to be happy about, but it's easy to ignore them or get like accustomed to them and like stop paying attention to them. So like the ability to actually pay attention, I think, is really important to like what is like good in your life. Yeah, it's one of those things like it's like asking what is beauty. You kind of know it when you see it, but like, could you like write a specification for it?
Mm-hmm. Do you optimize for happiness in terms of like how you make decisions?
I optimize for some amount of happiness. Like
You don't want to be miserable.
you need enough that you feel like, it's worth the effort to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're working on things that are really hard. You have to have that balance there. So I spend a fair amount of time in the wilderness, exercising, rock climbing, skiing, doing things like that, like, make me, I guess they make me happy, definitely. And then you can kind of, and having, friendships and things like that. And then that gives you the energy to, invest in things that are difficult.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So you read a lot. Is there a universe that you would live in if you could?
I like Ian Banks' culture novels. That's like definitely one of the best sort of utopian. It's like if AGI goes well, it's like the positive AGI outcome, benevolent AGI. That definitely feels like a world where people have like a pretty maximized ability to self-actualize in whatever way they want. I'm a little skeptical of like how he portrays how people take advantage of that. I think that, but it's like you have to take some liberty, and like you don't want to write a story that's like too weird or dissimilar from like the way humans are now, because it'll be hard to relate. So I think it's a little bit unrealistic in how the humans behave in that universe. Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy was actually the science fiction series that got me interested in longevity.
I read the first one.
I liked Red Mars. I highly recommend the full thing. The arc is pretty impressive. That one I go back to a lot. Actually, I've read that one 6 times.
Okay, then I'll definitely have to get back to it and read the second one, which is like green, right? They're all like different colors of Mars as it becomes like colonizer, whatever. So it goes like red, brown. What other colors are red and green in that context? There's 3 of them.
They actually like longevity treatments were developed as a side effect of them trying to make people more resistant to the radiation that one deals with on the surface of Mars. And I think that was actually kind of a good story aspect, because like that, I think that is true. Like for instance, the side effect of like people developing fake meat stuff and then becoming, and then like finding applications in like regenerative medicine. Like I think we'll actually, or even like going to Mars and surviving on Mars is going to require us to be able to produce healthy protein where we can't do low cost animal agriculture. So there's a lot of the times that like there's a lot of overlap that can happen in terms of technology development.
That makes sense. And then, so we got into a variety of topics today. Is there anything we missed that you think, given the context of what we're talking about, we should talk about real quick?
Well, I have a question for you.
Sure, hit me.
So assuming you could have, really good health indefinitely, how long would you want to live?
As long as my wife does.
Yeah. So like N-1 to your wife's age.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I think there's a lot of cool things in the world. Probably as long as she wants to be alive, I'll probably stay alive, or else I would get pretty bored without her. What about you?
Okay. Well, assuming she would also not die if she didn't need to.
Yes. Well, who knows? I could be like a genie benevolently gives me longevity, but not her. And it's like, okay, then 60 more years, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's not really the thing. Is like if we develop these technologies, they'll be for everybody. I think. I mean, unless we choose to have like an economic system that concentrates wealth into the hands of a very small number of people, that would be a dumb thing to do. Humans wouldn't do that, would they?
No, we wouldn't. Have you seen the movie Elysium? It's kind of a little preview there.
Yeah.
Actually, for some books,
intrinsically, like for instance, like the COVID vaccines are kind of primitive gene therapies actually, and they cost $20 a pop, right? Like gene therapy in principle should be very, very cheap. If it's expensive, it's not because of like the nature of it on a technical level. It's because of our social economic system, and that's something that can be changed. So I think that'll be actually like longevity might be like if we do develop therapies for longevity, that could actually be a driver for change that is overdue for many reasons, not just longevity.
Yeah. And I think even if it was like a bunch of like business billionaires getting the benefit, they're going to guinea pig on the rest of us, which means that it has to work for the rest of us first. Because like if you're a billionaire, there's like a longevity therapy. Are you going to take the experimental thing, or are you going to watch it be implemented on other people and then let it be implemented on yourself once you know it's safe?
And of course,
so
if you have longevity therapies that work, you're gonna. I mean, capitalism has its pros and cons, but like it wants to make money, and if you make more money by having 1 billion customers than you do by having 10 customers, so people are going to want to figure out how to make it as widespread as possible because bigger market is better.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's actually, as my last question, so one of the things that people always worry about, I don't know, like the conspiracy theories is like they figured out cancer, they figured out, but like no, they don't want to share with people, which is not true. If they found cancer, they would be like singing that, especially the scientists. Like they couldn't keep that bottled up. Is there a conspiracy theory that you like? It doesn't have to be true, but you just like enjoy the veracity of it. I think like flat Earth people are just like they put a smile on my face whenever I hear about them. And I'm sorry if you are one, but it makes me smile that anyone believes in it. It's just like this is like the most funny conspiracy theory I've ever heard.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't think about it too much. I don't know if I have a favorite one. Like the one that comes up for me often is that I think there's a pretty strong aversion culturally to genetic modification, but I think that mostly comes not from people understanding or being bothered by genetic modification from a technical perspective specifically. It's more that their only like exposure to the concept is reading about like the latest shitty thing Monsanto did, right? And so it's like I think a lot of the negativity around genetic modification comes from actually it's a misdirection of people's like sort of anger at like the bad business practices of a particular company rather than the technology itself and what it could do to benefit them.
Thank you for joining us today with the Learn With Lowell show. Check us out at learnwithlowell.com. Anywhere podcasts can be found, subscribe. Tell me what you thought of this episode. Check us out on YouTube in particular. That's a new thing I'm doing. Timestamps and links are in the show notes. Thank you for coming, and I hope every one of you found something today that you're curious about to learn more about, and you'll go out and be curious and learn something new. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.